Hi, I'm Reese, and I wish this story didn't start with the kind of silence that makes your stomach turn. But it does. It started with a phone call from Jacob's daycare, not a casual one, not the kind where they ask if you want to bring cupcakes for snack week. No, this one began with a strained voice on the other end of the line. Hi, Ms. Reese. We've been trying to reach someone for the past 2 hours. Jacob is still here, and everyone else has gone home. That moment? It doesn't feel like a moment. It feels like your brain short circuits while your heart sprints out of your body and screams into the void. No, 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 this isn't happening. I blinked. It was 6:07 p.m. My parents had agreed, no, insisted, on picking Jacob up that day. I had a meeting across town, and they said, just drop him off in the morning. We'll take care of everything. Everything. That word would taste like ash by the end of the day. I tried my mom first. Straight to voicemail, then my dad. Also voicemail. I called twice more, 3 times. No response, no text. No, oops, sorry, we're running late. Just silence. Cold, gaping, deliberate silence. I told the daycare I'd be there in 20 minutes. I was lying. It would take me 45. Traffic, panic. The sudden tunnel vision of betrayal. Jacob's teacher stayed with him. God bless Miss Alyssa. She kept him busy with puzzles and crackers and tried to make it feel normal. But a 6-year-old knows when he's been forgotten. When I finally pulled up, Jacob was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, quietly watching the window. He didn't run to me. He didn't cry. He just said, Grandpa said you didn't care anymore. So they left. I crouched down, fighting the knot in my throat, forcing myself not to react. Baby, I'm so sorry. That's not true. That will never be true. He nodded like he wanted to believe me, but I could already see it. The seed had been planted, the kind that takes years to unlearn. At home, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. And then, at 9:13 p.m., a single message came through from my mother. If you won't help this family, don't expect it to help you. No apology, no explanation, just a line meant to hurt. And it did. But not in the way she expected. Because this wasn't just a careless mistake. This wasn't an oversight. It was punishment. Jacob was collateral. My 6-year-old son, a child who had never done anything but trust them, was abandoned. Because I said no. Because I refused to lend my brother Lucas $30,000. Let me backtrack. Not far. Just enough for you to see the frame behind the picture. Lucas is the youngest, the golden boy, the investment, as my father once drunkenly joked at Thanksgiving. I was always the safe bet, the responsible one, the built-in babysitter, the emergency fund, the convenient stand-in when they needed help moving, hosting, paying off that random dental bill Lucas forgot about. Again, when I filed for divorce 2 years ago, I didn't ask them for help. When I started working 2 jobs to keep Jacob's life stable, I didn't burden them. But somehow, in their eyes, that made me less of a daughter. Not more. Last week, Lucas called me. He said he was launching a consulting firm, which, in Lucas speak, meant I have an idea and no business plan. He needed $30,000. Urgently. A bridge loan, he said. When I told him I couldn't, he didn't even get mad at first. He just paused. Then he laughed. Sis, you make more money than anyone in this family. What? You suddenly forgot where you came from? I told him I didn't forget. That's why I was done funding this fantasy where everyone else gets to make mistakes, and I get to clean them up. I guess that conversation made its way to my parents. I guess the message got twisted, because now their silence spoke volumes, and Jacob paid the price. I didn't call them that night. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of my bed while Jacob slept, wrapped in his favorite fleece blanket, still too small for him, still smelling like baby shampoo and apple juice. I opened the Notes app on my phone, typed exactly 4 words. Document. Everything. From now. Because something inside me shifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. If blood is what binds us, then cruelty is what broke us. Jacob was asleep, finally. After asking one too many questions I didn't have answers for. Why didn't Grandma and Grandpa come back? Did I do something wrong? Is it because of the dinosaur drawing I forgot in the car? No. No, baby. None of this was your fault. But that's the thing about generational damage. Kids always think it starts with them. After I tucked him in, I sat alone in the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. The same fridge that once held my mother's passive-aggressive post-it notes growing up. Dishes don't wash themselves. Your brother needs space. Don't hog the living room. You're not eating that last piece of cake, are you? Notes in place of conversations. Punishments in place of presents. It wasn't the first time Jacob had been used as leverage. It just wasn't this blatant before. And the moment my mother sent that message, some part of my memory hit playback. Things I hadn't thought about in years came rushing back. Uncurated. Uninvited. I was 9 when I learned my place in the family hierarchy. Lucas had dropped out of his school's science fair the night before, panicking over an unfinished volcano project. I offered to help, stayed up with him, mixed the glue, painted the cardboard. We laughed. I thought it was a good night. The next day, he presented it. Took second place. When he came home, our mom threw a little dinner celebration. Lucas's favorite mac and cheese, brownies from a box, and a gold star sticker on his backpack. I stood there, waiting. Not even a thank you. Later that week, I brought home my own win. A district writing contest. First place. I showed my mom the certificate, still creased from my backpack. She didn't even look up from her phone. Did you remember to take the chicken out of the freezer? That's the thing. With kids like me, eldest daughters, they don't have to say it. You learn it in the pauses, in the way they forget your wins, and memorize your schedule like it's a utility plan. The family needed me to keep things going, and I did. When I turned 16, I took a part-time job at a diner to save up for college. When Lucas turned 16, he got a brand new MacBook and a prepaid credit card for emergencies. I bought my prom dress secondhand. Lucas had a rented tux, tailored to fit. Every milestone for me was a lesson in compromise. For him, celebration. When I was 21 and Lucas crashed my car after a party, he was underage, buzzed, and with a girl in the passenger seat, I didn't hesitate. I took the blame. Why? Because my dad looked me in the eye and said, "If you love your brother, you'll protect him. You know he can't afford to mess this up." He was applying to schools. Early decision. Like that absolved everything. I still remember signing the insurance forms. "You're the responsible one, Reese," my mother added. Like that was a badge of honor and not a ball and chain. Responsible. They said that word like it was a compliment. But what they meant was disposable. What they meant was, we trust you to clean up after the mess we enable. I remember the worst one. I just had Jacob. I was broke, exhausted. Postpartum depression hitting me like an unexpected undertow in a still ocean. I called my mom, asked if I could stay a few days, just to sleep, just to reset. She said yes, but only if I agreed to babysit Lucas's kids while he and his wife went on their anniversary trip. I was 3 weeks postpartum, stitches still in, but they needed me. "You'll manage," she said. "You always do." And I did. Because I didn't know how to say no, not yet. But this time was different. The stakes had changed. They didn't just hurt me, they touched Jacob. They made him feel forgotten. And that was the line. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty about holding boundaries. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through old emails. I found a transfer receipt, $12,000 to Lucas, dated 18 months ago, labeled business startup loan. Then another, $8,500, marked emergency dental. Then another, $5,000 cash withdrawal I made to pay off his parking tickets so he wouldn't lose his license. Altogether, nearly $30,000. Already gone, already forgotten. I screen-capped each one, filed them into a new folder. No more silence. Then I typed a text to Lucas. "Before you say I've done nothing for you, check your inbox." He read it. Then, 10 minutes later, he sent a voice memo. You're seriously doing this now? Over money? This is what you've always been like. Bitter, controlling. You couldn't handle being second, even when you were first. Mom and Dad always said you'd turn your back one day. One day? Like this wasn't a lifetime in the making? I didn't respond. Instead, I printed every transaction I could find. Not just for Lucas, but for my parents too. The co-signed medical bills, the groceries I'd bought every month for 2 years, the time I paid the property tax shortfall so they wouldn't lose the house. And I laid them out, paper by paper, across my living room floor, like I was building a case file. Because I was. Not to sue, but to finally tell the truth to myself. I was not selfish. I was used. And I decided something right then. The next time they needed me, I wouldn't answer the phone. I wouldn't rush in. I'd let the silence speak. The same way they did with my son. If you've ever been told you're the strong one, just so no one had to check on you, you're not alone. It was the middle of a Wednesday when Lucas decided to remind me who I'd always been in this family, an obstacle to his comfort. He called. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Stupid muscle memory. Reese, he started, tone already flippant, like he was doing me a favor by calling. So, got your little email? Little. I imagined him sitting in his car, Bluetooth in ear, probably parked outside a bar or in the gym lot pretending he still had a membership. Voice smug, detached, like he didn't just get sent a spreadsheet of every dollar I'd handed him over the years. You tracked all that down just to guilt trip me? No, Lucas, I said flat. I tracked it because you made me feel crazy for saying no. And now I want a record. He scoffed. You think a few receipts make you better than me? That's what this is, right? You always had this complex, like you were the martyr. I let him talk. Not because I needed to hear it. Because I needed to record it. He kept going, tone rising. You're punishing the whole family over one small thing. One loan. You want control, not fairness. You always have. That word echoed. Control. Funny. For someone who's never paid a bill on time in his life, he sure had a grip on my history. When I hung up, I sat with that word. Control. What an elegant insult. What a perfect deflection. Calling me controlling was easier than admitting they had depended on me too much. It painted me as rigid, cold, withholding, just because I finally enforced a boundary. But the truth? I was never in control. They were. I never dictated the rules. I just lived by them, their emergencies, their drama, their timetable. Now that I was stepping out of that orbit, they were spinning out, and they hated it. Later that night, I got a call from my mom. I answered, not because I wanted to hear her voice, because I needed to hear how far she'd go to protect Lucas at my expense. Reese, she said, not cold, but deliberate. We need to talk. About what? Your grandson you left in a daycare parking lot? There was a pause. Not of guilt, but calculation. We didn't leave him. We made a choice. You chose to alienate the family. We responded. You didn't respond, I said slowly. You punished a 6-year-old for something he didn't do. You left him. Her voice didn't crack. If anything, it got sharper. We did what we had to do. This family functions on reciprocity. You've chosen independence. So, enjoy it. That was it. That was the point of no return. I should have hung up, but I asked, quietly, when did love start costing money with you? Her answer? When you stopped understanding sacrifice. After she hung up, I stared at the wall, phone still pressed to my ear. I wasn't crying. Not anymore. It was something colder. A sadness so still it felt ancient. A grief not for what I lost, but for realizing I never really had it to begin with. The next day, I printed every document I'd gathered. Not to confront them. Not yet. I was preparing for something else. Something cleaner than revenge. More lasting than silence. Accountability. And sometimes, accountability doesn't look like fire and fury. It looks like structure, like a plan. I reached out to a former client, now a lawyer, who owed me a favor. She didn't ask why I needed help, just said, "Let's build it right." I sent her a folder titled Family Finance All Records. Within 2 hours, she replied, "They owe you more than money. Let's make this airtight." I spent the rest of the afternoon pulling files. Bills I paid, leases I co-signed, even a contract I'd drawn up in 2020 that Lucas had signed but never honored. I organized it all into sections: emergency loans, household contributions, legal exposure, risks to Jacob. Because this wasn't just about what they took, it was about how they did it. Quietly, constantly, and always with the language of obligation. That night, I stared at Jacob while he watched a cartoon on the floor, half asleep. His cheeks were sticky from the applesauce he insisted on feeding himself. His left sock was halfway off. His favorite dinosaur shirt had a juice stain. And all I could think was, I will never let him believe that love is something he needs to earn through silence. I picked up my phone, called my bank, started separating accounts, scrubbing shared authorizations, untangling my name from theirs. It was tedious, technical, but each step felt like cutting a cord I hadn't realized was choking me. One click at a time. Then I opened an old folder, tucked deep inside a Dropbox account I hadn't visited in years. It was labeled Lucas 2019 Settlement. Inside, screenshots of emails where Lucas admitted fault in a car accident we told the insurance I had caused. I had buried it. To protect him, but now I wasn't protecting anymore. I was preserving. If someone's ever made you feel like you owed them for being loved, maybe this chapter hits a little too real. I didn't mean to find it. Not then, not that day. I wasn't digging into history. I was trying to fill out school enrollment forms for Jacob. New district, new protocols. They wanted full custodial documentation, which I'd always glossed over, never needed before. I opened the old lockbox buried in the hall closet, the one with our social security cards, vaccination records, Jacob's birth certificate, and there it was. A worn manila envelope, brittle at the corners, sealed with yellowed tape. I peeled it open, expecting the usual. My birth certificate, maybe old immunization slips. What I got instead was something else. A file. Thin, neat, cold. Foster placement. Confidential child name. Reese Lanier. Placement date. March 14th. Year redacted. Biological parent. Deceased placement guardian. Diane and Walter Lanier. Maternal aunt and spouse. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat on the hallway floor. Papers spread around me like snow. It was like something in my bones knew before my mind did. Suddenly, every strange moment in my childhood came back in flashes. That time my cousin whispered, "You're not really their kid, you know." The way my mother would go quiet when people asked about my birth story. The photo albums that started with Lucas's baby pictures, none of mine. The slight hesitation whenever someone said I looked nothing like them. And still, I clung to logic. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe they just took guardianship after something temporary. But then I saw the letter tucked at the back. Typed, stamped, legal, final custody confirmation, minor Reese Lanier. I called the only person I could trust with something this heavy, my godmother, Renee. She was my mom's oldest friend, now living in Arizona. She picked up on the second ring. "Reese? Did you know?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. Not yet. A pause. Then, "I was wondering when you'd find out." That was enough. "What happened?" I asked. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me?" Renee let out a long sigh, not tired, but sad in that way you only get when you've been carrying a secret that was never yours to keep. "Your mother, your biological mother, she died in a car crash. You were barely a toddler. Diane stepped in because CPS said if no family took you, they'd place you in the system." "Why didn't she just tell me?" "Because," Renee said, soft but pointed, "Diane doesn't like loose ends, and she sure as hell doesn't like being seen as anything less than the martyr." I hung up. Not out of anger, out of clarity. So many things made sense now. Why I was always the helper, not the star. Why Lucas was the real future. Why I never saw baby photos of myself in our living room. I had never belonged in the way I thought I did. I was kept, contained, useful. I went back to the kitchen, paper still in hand, and stared at Jacob sitting on the floor with his action figures. I saw myself in him, his heart too big for his own safety, and I felt a rage rise inside me. Not loud, not explosive, refined, surgical. If they could hide something this fundamental about me my whole life, then what else had they buried? What else had I paid for without knowing? I pulled out an old storage bin from the attic. Inside, tax records, bank slips, old correspondence. Buried beneath them was a sealed letter addressed to Walter, my dad. The return address? A private estate lawyer's firm in Virginia. I opened it. Inside, an estate breakdown from my biological grandmother's will. A modest trust had been left, specifically to me. Not Lucas, not Diane. Me. The value? $26,000. Marked as Education Fund. Transferred in full to Diane's account in 2007. No record of it ever reaching me. They hadn't just raised me, they'd absorbed me, like a tax write-off. All that money. And when I begged for help with Jacob after my divorce, I was told, "You made your choices. We're not here to fix your mess." I couldn't confront them yet. I wasn't ready to scream. I wanted them to explain themselves, on my terms. So I did something calculated. I printed every record, every form, every stolen dollar, bound them in a neat black folder. Then, I wrote a single post-it note on the front. "Since we're keeping receipts." And I mailed it to their house. Tracked. Signature required. That night, I made Jacob hot cocoa, even though it was warm outside. He took one sip and made a face. "It's too chocolatey." "You're too honest." He grinned. And I thought, that's the point. We'll be honest in this house, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. If you've ever questioned your place in your own family, and suddenly got an answer you never saw coming, this one might stay with you for a while. The package was signed for at 9:41 a.m. I knew because the tracking app pinged a little green checkmark next to "Delivered Received by D. Lanier." I imagined my mother slicing open the seal, pulling out the black folder, peeling the post-it off the cover. "Since we're keeping receipts." It wasn't petty. It was precise. It was a mirror. She always said she valued clarity. Now she had it. 2 days passed. Silence. No calls. No texts. Not even a snide comment via Lucas, which, frankly, was a miracle. But then Sunday came. I was on the porch, watering the succulents Jacob and I had planted during spring break, when a black SUV rolled up the curb. My father stepped out first. Pressed. Polished. As if he'd just walked off a golf course. Diane followed, wearing the same pale blue sweater she always wore when she wanted to appear soft. I didn't move. I let them walk the length of the driveway without offering an invitation. "We need to talk," Walter said. I stared. "Did you come to apologize to Jacob? Because he's not here." He ignored the question. "We saw your materials." Materials. Like it was an HR packet. Diane stepped forward, folding her hands. "This isn't how family handles conflict, Reese. You blindsided us." I laughed. Not bitter, just tired. "You're right. Family doesn't lie about origins, steal inheritance, and abandon children in parking lots. So maybe we aren't family after all." My mother's voice sharpened. The facade cracked. "You think a few bank slips and a dusty file make you a victim?" "No," I replied. "They make me free." Walter narrowed his eyes. "Let's not pretend you didn't benefit. You had a roof, food, private school. We gave you a life." "You sold me a version of love," I said, stepping closer, "and I paid for it in silence." Diane flinched, but didn't back down. This performance, it's because we didn't pick up your son?" And there it was, that awful minimizing phrasing. "He's not my son, Reese, not in the way that matters. He's not blood." The world dimmed for half a second. My fingers went numb. Say that again, I whispered. I didn't mean, she started, but Walter cut in. He's not ours. You know that. It's time you stopped expecting us to pretend otherwise. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It roared. And somewhere in the background, a neighbor's wind chime trembled. I'm going to say this once, I said slowly. You don't ever speak about my son again. Not like that. Not in front of me. Not to anyone. Walter raised a brow. You going to disown us, Reese? No, I said. You already did that the day you left him alone. I stepped back toward the front door and opened it. And if either of you ever approaches him again, ever, I'll file for a protective order. Emotional endangerment isn't that hard to prove when you document everything. Diane's lip curled. You're going to destroy your own family over pride? No, I said. I'm rebuilding it. I closed the door. Not slammed, just closed, with finality. Inside, I stood there, hand still on the knob, breathing like I'd run a mile. Jacob peeked around the hallway corner. Was that Grandma? Not anymore, I said, kneeling to his level. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I just remembered I don't need people who forget me. Jacob blinked. Can we have pancakes for dinner? I laughed, finally. You bet, baby. Sometimes what breaks you isn't the betrayal. It's the realization they never saw you as theirs to begin with. The first night after cutting my parents off, I slept better than I had in years. Not the kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion. Not the crash of emotional overload. No, this was quiet. Even. Real rest. There were no what-ifs dancing in my mind. No drafts of apology texts I'd never send. No internal debates about being too harsh. The kind of peace you only get when you finally stop negotiating your worth. The next morning, I looked around my house and realized how many things weren't really mine. The couch, hand-me-down, kitchen table, a gift from my parents, given with a warning, don't let Jacob destroy it. Even the wall art, quotes like, family is everything, felt like sarcasm now. I started packing things that felt like freedom. Only freedom. A week later, I signed a lease on a small townhouse 30 minutes out of the city. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, no yard, squeaky stairs. But it had light. And no ghosts. Jacob adjusted faster than I expected. Do we get to pick our own paint colors? He asked, practically vibrating with excitement as we walked through the empty rooms. We do, I said, but only if you promise not to pick lava red again. He laughed so hard he hiccuped. I called Renee, the only adult who hadn't lied to me. Should I tell them where we moved? She didn't hesitate. Do they deserve to know? No. There's your answer. I didn't need permission, but it felt good to have someone say it out loud. I started working remotely more, picking up freelance projects that paid well, even if they lacked security. Security had always been a myth in my family anyway. I'd rather have freedom with risk than safety under someone else's terms. Each night after Jacob went to bed, I sat with a cup of peppermint tea and wrote a list of things no one ever taught me. How to love without keeping score. How to set boundaries and not call it betrayal. How to say this is enough and mean it. One night, while sorting through an old email inbox, I stumbled on something I'd forgotten existed. A scholarship offer I declined years ago because my mom said, "That school's too far. You'll be abandoning your family." They called it selflessness. I see now. It was sabotage dressed as love. I emailed the university out of curiosity. They replied within hours. We'd love to talk. Your portfolio is still impressive. I wasn't sure where it would go, but even thinking about it felt like inhaling after holding my breath for years. The twist wasn't rage. The twist was relief. Leaving wasn't some big explosion. It was a quiet, consistent series of choices. No calls returned. No guilt absorbed. No lies accepted. Just movement. I didn't host a goodbye party. I didn't draft a social media statement. I just left. And I started living. The letter came on a Thursday. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Controlled, masculine. I opened it with the kind of instinct you only have when you've lived long enough to know trouble doesn't always knock. It sometimes whispers. Reese, your father isn't well. I know you've made it clear you want space, but this may be your last chance. I thought you should know. Renee. I read it twice, then a third time. She wasn't asking me to forgive. She wasn't even asking me to act, just to know. That night, I sat in bed with my laptop closed, Jacob asleep beside me. He'd had a nightmare and asked to stay close. I don't want the shadows to eat me, he'd whispered. I didn't ask what shadows. Some fears don't need translation. I looked at his face, peaceful again in sleep, and thought, what kind of legacy do I want to leave him? The next day, I drove. Not out of guilt, but clarity. Some things don't need to be undone, just understood. I found myself parked outside a rehab facility 2 counties over. I didn't even know they'd moved him here. Didn't care to ask. The front desk clerk gave me a room number and a nod that said, "You're not the first child to come here conflicted." He was thinner. That was the first thing I noticed. Then the oxygen tank, the tremble in his left hand. He looked up when I entered. For a moment, we just stared. "Reese," he said finally, like he'd been trying out my name silently before saying it aloud. "I'm not here to make peace," I said. "I'm just here." His eyes closed, then opened slowly. That's more than I expected. There was no apology, no explanation, but also no denial. Just air between us. Heavy, but not poisonous anymore. "I always thought being a provider was enough," he said after a while. "I didn't know how to be good." "That was the difference," I said. "You thought it was a role. I needed it to be a relationship." He looked down at his hands. "I knew what Diane did to you. I let it happen." "I know. And I let her say those things about Jacob. I didn't stop her." "I know that too." His eyes welled, not with drama, but something more painful, recognition. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said, "because I don't have it. But I do have something else." He looked at me. "I have my son, and I'll do better." He nodded once. That was all. I left before the nurse came in. Didn't hug him, didn't cry. Some endings don't need closure, just a boundary. That night, Jacob came into my room again, clutching his blanket. "Is it okay if I grow up and still want to sleep near you sometimes?" I smiled. "If you grow up and forget how to ask, that's when I'll worry." He crawled beside me and curled into the crook of my arm. "You're the best mom," he said, half asleep. I whispered back, "I'm just trying to make sure you never have to unlearn love." The school called the project Roots and Wings. Each child had to draw a family tree and write a short letter about where they came from and what made their family special. Jacob came home with his instructions clutched in one hand and 2 crayons in the other, blue and yellow. "Those are our colors," he said. "Sky and sunshine." I smiled. "We'll make it together." That night, we spread paper across the kitchen table. I let him decide the shape. He drew spirals instead of branches. "This tree doesn't go just one way," he explained. "It loops back. Because sometimes people leave, but you still remember them. Just not like before." He was 6, but somehow he was right. When he finished writing his letter, he handed it to me to check spelling. "My family is me and my mom. She's the roots because she keeps me safe. I'm the wings because I get to try everything and always come home." I didn't correct a word. A week later, the school invited parents to see the display. I walked down the corridor, lined with construction paper trees and glitter-glued names. And then I saw Jacob's, spirals and sunshine, and under it, a single word painted in bold letters. Lanier, not Reese, not Jacob. Just the name we shared. Claimed, chosen. My throat tightened. As I stared at that wall, I realized this story wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I kept, what I chose. It was never revenge, it was return. To myself. Outside the classroom, a woman touched my shoulder. "I hope you don't mind me saying," she said softly. "Your son, he talks about you like you're magic." I smiled. He makes me believe in it. I used to think being strong meant staying, enduring, explaining myself again and again to people who already decided who I was. But walking away taught me something deeper. Peace isn't earned through suffering. It's claimed through self-worth. If you've been silenced, minimized, forgotten, I want you to remember, you don't have to wait for someone to give you permission to heal. You can write your own ending. You can choose softness without surrender. You can be whole without being understood. Jacob didn't need a perfect family tree. He just needed a place where he could grow without fear. And so did I. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming space. If you've ever been told you don't belong, go build the place where you do. If you've ever had to walk away from people who called it love, just drop a black heart in the comments. You're not alone. Some stories don't end with a grand apology or a door left open. Some just end when you choose yourself. If this story touched something inside you, tell me where you're watching from. Or just share a single word that sums up what this meant to you. If you didn't connect with it, that's okay too. Drop your thoughts, and let's talk about why. And hey, if you want more real stories like this, hit that subscribe button. We're not just building a channel, we're building a space where truth has room to breathe. Thank you for staying till the end. You weren't alone in this. Not for a second.